Hello and welcome and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma. Here's our lineup for tonight. Have you seen what's happening in Iran? You can't look away. Take a look at these visuals now. These video clips are all over social media. They show the ancestral home in Iran of the Islamic Republic's late founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Activists say the home was torched by protesters. While it's hard to verify when these videos were filmed, there's enough happening elsewhere on the streets of Iran to show you the impact of the ongoing protests. Even as nationwide protests call for an end to hardline clerical rule, global pressure on the Iranian regime is mounting. What began as a protest against the headscarf has now become a fight for human rights. Since Mahsa Amini's death in the custody of Iran's morality police, Iran's young are defying the regime's diktat. So on Gravitas tonight, we show you the streets of Iran and let you decide, will these protests be successful in challenging the status quo? Or will the brutal crackdown silence the voices? Also on the show, we tell you what's happening in the Korean Peninsula. North Korea fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. Japan claims that the weapon may have had the range to hit the United States mainland. What's North Korea up to? We'll discuss. And guess what was trending earlier? RIP Twitter. The mayhem at Twitter continues and the chief twit is keeping us all informed of each step, or should I say misstep. But mass resignations are underway. Where is Twitter 2.0 headed? We'll tell you about a life-changing treatment for diabetes that just got the green light from the US FDA. It can delay the onset of type 1 diabetes, an ailment which affects mostly kids and teenagers. Will the treatment be adopted globally? That's our question. And in our countdown to the Qatar World Cup, which kicks off this weekend, we tell you about the 5 stars to watch out for, all coming up on the show today. The protests in Iran are now in their 3rd month. But this week, they have taken a defining turn. Protesters are now expressing their anger against the regime in violent ways. Just look at this. This is the old home of Ayatollah Khomeini, the first supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Reports claim angry protesters attack Khomeini's home with petrol bombs. They set it on fire. Take a look.
آتیش زدن خونه خمینی رو آتیش زدن بابا دمتون گرم بابا دمتون گرم آتیش زدن.
Yes, violence is escalating on the streets of Iran. The protests are intensifying. The crackdown by the regime is becoming more brutal. So where is the violent face-off headed? This is our top focus on Gravitas tonight. Let's begin. Like I said, the protests are intensifying. This week, Iranians went on strike in several cities. They were commemorating the protests in 2019, better known as Bloody November. They happened over fuel prices. Again, these were nationwide protests. But the Iranian regime had managed to crush them. But not this time. The regime has unleashed its anger in recent weeks, but they have failed to put an end to these protests. Let's now take a look at some more pictures. You may have seen these earlier. These are Tehran's metro stations. They have turned into protest sites. Iranian security forces opened fire on protesters right here. As many as 16,000 people have been arrested, and at least 362 protesters have been killed so far. This includes 56 children. 5 people died in the southwestern city of Izeh alone. Some reports claim 2 boys were shot dead by security forces. Their deaths have become the latest rallying cry for some protesters. The Iranian state media has described these shootings as a terrorist attack. They put out a video. Take a look. There's more. Let's now take a look at these pictures carefully. There is a motorbike driving past the pedestrians. And right at that moment, gunshots were heard. The Iranian press calls these shooters terrorists, but the opposition rejects that charge. There are claims that these shooters were part of the Iranian security establishment. Now, we haven't been able to independently verify this, but here is what we can say for sure. The Iranian regime is struggling to deal with a surge in protests. The protesters are targeting the Ayatollahs directly. Now look at this video. This year is the year of blood. Sayyid Ali will be toppled. That's what the protesters were apparently saying. They were referring to Iran's current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khomeini. Western powers are also putting pressure on Iran. Yesterday, the United States announced a fresh round of sanctions. They target Iranian petrochemical sales. Sanctions have been imposed over a dozen companies. They are based in China, Hong Kong and the UAE. Why were these companies sanctioned? Because they were allegedly facilitating the sale of Iranian petroleum products. Make no mistake about this, a revolution is brewing in Iran. What began as a protest against the headscarf has now become a fight for human rights, a fight for free speech and freedom of expression, of movement. But can these protests topple the regime? We don't know that yet, but it is clear. The Iranian leadership is facing its biggest challenge yet. From one nuclear regime, let's turn to another, North Korea. The Hermit Kingdom is in the news yet again, this time, for obvious reasons again, an unwarranted missile test. In the early hours of Friday morning, Pyongyang fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, a missile which may have had the range to hit the US mainland. Not making this up. Listen to this.
We analyzed the flight trajectory of the ICBM-class missile that was launched this time, and depending on the warhead and weight of the missile, it had a flying capability of 15,000 kilometers, which means it had enough range to reach United States mainland.
Japan has also released these images. They show the contrail left behind by the missile. It was apparently fired at 10:15 a.m. local time from a military base near Pyongyang. The missile then reached an altitude of 6,100 kilometers and traveled over 1,000 kilometers at a speed of Mach 22. That's around 27,000 kilometers per hour, a scary number. What's worse, the missile landed just 200 kilometers off Japan. Now remember, this comes within Japan's exclusive economic zone. Naturally, the reaction from Japan has been sharp and stinging. It has told Pyongyang that it won't tolerate any more such actions. Listen in.
Today, North Korea has launched a ballistic missile and it is believed to have fallen west of Hokkaido in our country's exclusive economic zone. We naturally lodged a strong protest against North Korea, which has repeated its provocations with unprecedented frequency. I would like to reiterate that we absolutely cannot tolerate this.
South Korea has issued a statement as well. It has condemned its neighbour's actions, calling it a violation of the UNSC resolution and a serious threat to the peace and stability of the Korean peninsula.
Our military detected an intercontinental ballistic missile launched into the East Sea from the Sunan area of Pyongyang around 10:15 a.m. The ICBM launched by North Korea is a grave provocation and a serious threat to the peace and stability of the Korean peninsula as well as the international community. And it is a clear violation of the UN Security Council resolution, so we are strongly against this, calling for it to be stopped immediately.
The timing of this incident is crucial. It comes amid the annual APEC meeting, that's the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, an intergovernment economic forum of the 21 economies in the Asia-Pacific region. It is holding a two-day summit in Bangkok, with leaders from Canada, Australia and the United States in attendance. In fact, US Vice President Kamala Harris, who is representing her country at the summit, held an emergency meeting right after the launch. Present there were the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Prime Minister of New Zealand Jacinda Ardern, among others. They all had to put out official engagements aside and sit down to discuss North Korea's recent provocation. Here's now a quick look at their reactions.
We strongly condemn these actions, and we again call for North Korea to stop further unlawful, destabilizing acts. On behalf of the United States, I reaffirm our ironclad commitment to our Indo-Pacific alliances.
Stand with the world, and indeed with our allies, in opposing and condemning this action in the strongest possible terms and calling for North Korea to stop this reckless activity.
Thank you. Canada joins our allies in condemning in the strongest terms the continued irresponsible actions of North Korea with multiple missile launches, including the latest one.
These leaders were not alone in condemning North Korea. Surprisingly, they were joined by China as well. Although it didn't directly slam Pyongyang, but it did request the North Korean leadership to maintain peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. A rare yet interesting rebuke of its so-called ally. Listen in.
China pays close attention to the development of the current situation on the Korean peninsula, maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula and preventing the situation from deteriorating and escalating conform to the common interest of the international community.
Now here's the thing. What North Korea did was nothing surprising. It has made a habit of firing missiles every time there's an important summit. Just look at what it did in May this year. This is when Joe Biden visited Japan. Right after he left, North Korea sent 3 ballistic missiles up in the air. All 3 were fired within the space of less than an hour. Then in September, we witnessed a similar provocation, this time during the visit of US Vice President to South Korea. Just as she left the country and flew back home, Pyongyang fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the sea. There's a pattern here. 2 months on, there's another eerily similar provocation. So what do we make of this? What is North Korea trying to do? Analysts say it is trying to gain attention. Now, why would it do that? Because Western leaders are occupied with the war in Ukraine. North Korea is trying to get its attention with such acts of defiance. And its efforts are bearing fruit. Look at these images. This is the South Korean Air Force holding guided bomb strike drills. They took place just hours after the missile test. Reports say Japan and the US military also conducted joint military drills. It was a tactical air drill aimed at reaffirming that both countries are ready to respond to any further escalation. But are they really? Look at this graph. Since 2012, North Korea has conducted more than 169 missile tests. 40 of them were conducted just this year. By doing so, North Korea has broken its own record for launches in any given year. So what have America and its allies done about this? Nothing much besides issuing statements, conducting drills and holding naval exercises. To be fair, they can't do any more than this because the scope of action is quite limited. You see, North Korea is the most isolated country in the world, one which has never played by any rules or paid heed to UN resolutions. But the recent spate of missile tests is alarming. 40 missiles in 1 year is no small number. It indicates a return of Kim Jong-un's brinkmanship, of his unwarranted belligerence against the West. What's he up to? What's he planning? It's hard to tell. But with every missile test, his nukes are inching closer and closer to the borders of America's allies. This time, the missile landed just 200 kilometers of Japan. There's no saying what could happen next. To put it simply, the West and its allies may be one missile test away from a major standoff. Our next story is about Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the kingdom's de facto ruler. The Biden administration has backed granting him immunity. Immunity from what exactly? From a legal case over his role in the killing of Saudi descent, Jamal Khashoggi. Our next report brings you more details. Take a look.
This image is of a court filing in the Jamal Khashoggi lawsuit. It has been filed by a legal advisor from the US State Department. Here's what it states. The State Department recognizes and allows the immunity of Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman as a sitting head of government of a foreign state. Prime Minister bin Salman, as a sitting head of government, is immune while in office from the jurisdiction of the United States District Court in this suit. What is this supposed to mean? In simple terms, it means MBS is immune from legal action in the lawsuit filed by murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi's fiancée. For the unversed, Khashoggi was a prominent Saudi critic who was murdered at the Saudi consulate in 2018. US intelligence at the time said it believed that MBS had ordered the killing. Khashoggi's fiancée had filed a lawsuit over the same. 4 years on, the US government says MBS is immune from the case due to his new role as Saudi Prime Minister. The State Department has called the move a purely legal determination. The question is it binding? Not really. According to reports, the Biden administration's suggestion is non-binding, meaning a judge will ultimately determine whether the Crown Prince should be granted immunity. Whatever be the case, it marks a big shift in the Khashoggi case in the near term, and in the long term, it means a possible return of MBS on the world stage. A return devoid of any charges and scrutiny in the Khashoggi case, at least from the end of America. Remember, the 37-year-old MBS became his country's prime minister in September, a move that formalized the power he had wielded as the kingdom's de facto ruler. The only thorn in the flesh he faced was the ongoing case into Khashoggi's murder. But now that America has granted him immunity from it, that too has been laid to rest.
I want to move on to our next story with a quote. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Have you heard this before? It's a dialogue from a movie called The Dark Knight. It came out in the year 2008. Why am I talking about it tonight? Because on some level, it reminded us all of Elon Musk. Take a look at this. building is the headquarters of Twitter, and in case you didn't notice, those insults were being hurled at Elon Musk. We don't know who was behind this projection, but we all know why they are angry. Twitter is in chaos. The Blue Bird has shut its offices again, this time without a reason. Twitter's offices will remain shut till the 21st of November. The last time this happened, Musk ended up sacking around 50% of Twitter's global workforce. On this occasion, Musk could be facing a rebellion. There are reports of mass resignations at Twitter. Hundreds of employees have decided to leave. Twitter's ability to operate is pretty much under threat. What's the reason behind the mass exodus? It could be this ultimatum from Musk. Earlier this week, he sent out an email. Employees were asked to commit to what Elon Musk called hardcore Twitter. That means long hours of work at a high intensity. What if employees didn't want to work so much? Musk said they could leave with a severance of 3 months. In fact, he sent this email with a link that the employees could use to communicate their choice. So with just a single click, employees could tell their bosses they are leaving. It was that simple. Musk's hardcore Twitter plan seems to have blown up in his face. Reports say he's now scrambling to retain some of the workers. Musk and his advisors held meetings with some of them, a personal outreach of sorts to steady the ship. Musk wrote another email. He appears to have softened his stand on the work policy, or rather the new work from home policy. Earlier, Musk had ended remote work. Reports say he is now indicating flexibility on that front. But by now it is too late. Some employees have already announced their resignations, ironically on Twitter. I have some of them with me now. Reports say these are Twitter employees who decided to leave. And I quote, "Today is my last day at Twitter, leaving with a full heart and immense gratitude. Deciding to join Twitter 7.5 years ago was one of the easiest decisions ever made. Deciding to leave today was 100% the opposite. Nearly 2 years at the tweet shop, and today is my last day." And finally, another one. "What a ride, Tweeps. You're the absolute best. Until next time." A bittersweet goodbye. These exits sparked a new trend on Twitter. Hashtag RIP Twitter, rest in peace. These are all kinds of tweets. There are all kinds of tweets with this hashtag. There are memes and jokes. One user used the visuals of a sinking ship to describe the situation at Twitter. Like the employees, some users are also leaving Twitter. They are turning towards alternatives, like Mastodon. In fact, some high-profile users are ensuring that their followers have a backup plan. Like lawmaker Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Today, she reminded her followers that she is on Instagram too. That's not all. Celebrities are taking a dig at Twitter. Here is Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell, and Octavia Spencer.
I mean, I don't know. I just look at it like, Twitter was, and will always be a dumpster fire. Mm-hmm. And messy. I like dumpster fires because something's wrong with me.
And I'm a firefighter.
But yeah, exactly. But who knows? We got to play it by ear. I mean, I don't. We'll see where it all goes. I was around when MySpace and Friendster were a thing. And social media platforms. It feels like Twitter and TikTok are everything right now. But these things, they all come and go. Yeah. Like anything in life. So.
You heard them. Seems like Reynolds is waiting for Twitter to blow up. What about Elon Musk? Earlier this month, he reminded his followers that Twitter will do lots of dumb things in coming months. I'm quoting him. Did he plan for these departures? How will he steady the ship? We don't know that yet. Musk did say, however, he's not super worried about people leaving. So will he be the hero who saved Twitter? Or will he be the villain who watches the platform go down? Once again, we'll have to wait to find out the answer to that question. But speaking of villains, America has found a new one. Bomb-laden drones. The director of the FBI says drones equipped with explosives are circulating within the United States and have the potential of destabilizing the country. What is this statement based on? And who is making these drones? Take a look.
Taking the last part first, certainly I would support a national strategy.
This is Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI. He has made a sensational revelation. It concerns drones equipped with homemade bombs. Wray says they have been circulating across the United States. This is what he told a Senate committee during a briefing on global threats. We're investigating, even as we speak, several instances within the US of attempts to weaponize drones with homemade IEDs. That is the future, that is here now. These are extraordinarily sophisticated tools that can carry drugs, that can launch weaponry, and we must be able to counter it. The statement is alarming, especially for the United States, which is witnessing domestic turmoil in the form of political polarization. The FBI director didn't say if his findings had anything to do with it. Neither did he say who is making such drones or where they're coming from. But authorities aren't taking any chances. From the Homeland Security Department to justice officials across the country, they're all urging the US Congress to expand counter-drone authority, to designate certain events and block drones from flying near them. Remember, at the end of the year, America holds a series of public events, like the Super Bowl in Arizona, the Formula One in Las Vegas, and the New Year's Eve in Times Square. The FBI director's warning was aimed at shielding these events from potential threats that drones pose. Remember, in recent years, several drone sightings have been reported across America. In June 2020, an unexplained drone sighting in Colorado prompted investigations from the FBI and the US military. In January 2019, a drone sighting halted flights at New York's second biggest airport, and in 2018, a drone was sighted flying dangerously close to an Airbus flight. Now, these drones could have been recreational, they could have been invented by a techie for research purposes, or they could have belonged to a rogue outfit trying to inflict damage. But in both cases, the threat to the common public at large cannot be overruled. The FBI director's warning has only reaffirmed this.
You know, in all this talk of politics and conflict, we often lose sight of things that directly affect you and me, and those around us. Our health, for instance. A life-changing therapy has been approved in the United States. This news may have gotten lost in the noise of war and chaos, but it has implications for all of us. Why? One word: diabetes. A treatment which delays the onset of type 1 diabetes has been approved in America by the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA. Why does this matter? 1. The FDA is responsible for protecting public health. It regulates drugs and products which are circulated in the United States. The tag, FDA approved, works as an assurance for many. A review of safety, quality, and the efficacy of a drug. Number 2, an FDA approval is the only way to legally market a drug or device in the United States. For instance, when the Pfizer vaccine was approved for public use against coronavirus, it gave the public confidence that the vaccine is safe to use. And my third and final point, the disease in question, diabetes. We're talking about the first treatment delaying the onset of type 1 diabetes. But what's that? Type 1 diabetes, it happens when your body does not make insulin because your immune system attacks and destroys the cells that make insulin. So those living with type 1 diabetes need to give themselves insulin shots daily to stay alive and healthy. It usually affects children and young adults, and evidence suggests that you're at a higher risk of type 1 diabetes if you have a parent, a brother or sister living with the ailment. It's genetic. Now, according to the FDA, more than 1 in 10 adults, 1 in 10, specifically in America, are living with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. What about the global figures? Well, globally in 2021, there were around 8.4 million people with type 1 diabetes only. Coming back to why we're talking about diabetes today, what has the FDA approved? The first therapy for prevention of type 1 diabetes, an antibody called teplizumab. It will be marketed under the name Tzield. It is thought to work by protecting the body's own insulin-producing cells. A recent study found that 1.3 million Americans with diabetes were rationing the use of insulin in the past year because of high costs. So if Tzield can delay the progression of full-blown diabetes, it can save lives. But you see, those living with diabetes are apprehensive about trying new drugs. Moreover, Tzield is approved for use in people 8 and older. So let's be clear. This treatment will only delay the onset of type 1 diabetes, not prevent it. But we know that screening for the disease is a huge challenge for patients. So the big question is, will it be adopted by all diabetes patients globally? We'll have to wait for more data on that. Now, we know that this treatment has been approved in the United States. But as I said, 8.4 million were living with type 1 diabetes globally till last year. So this could set the tone for other countries to approve similar treatments as well. But whatever happens in the future, it's clear. In the case of diabetes, a delayed diagnosis can change your life. And so, given the fact that this ailment affects mostly kids and teenagers, a new treatment which can delay the onset can change your life too. Let's now turn our attention to India. The Indian space industry took a giant leap forward today. India has launched its first privately developed rocket. The rocket is called Vikram S. It can travel at 5 times the speed of sound and carry a payload of 83 kilograms. The rocket was developed by an Indian startup. The successful launch is a major milestone. Earlier, only the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, could launch rockets. So how will India benefit from opening up the space sector? Here's a report.
1, 0. Event number 96 completed.
The global commercial space industry has a new challenger. India's space sector is opening up, and it hopes to take on giants like SpaceX or Blue Origin. The launch of Vikram S from Sriharikota is a major milestone. So far, India's state-run space agency, ISRO, had a monopoly on launching rockets. Not anymore. The Vikram S is India's first privately developed rocket. It was built by a startup, Skyroot, and named after Vikram Sarabhai. Sarabhai was an Indian physicist and astronomer. He is often called the father of India's space program. The Vikram S splashed down in the Bay of Bengal just about 5 minutes after its launch. But even with a short flight, made a big statement.
The vehicle reached space to an altitude of 89.5 kilometers and completed the required mission objectives. This Praram mission, as the name signifies, is the beginning of a new era in the Indian space ecosystem.
Skyroot is just one of India's many space startups. As of July this year, ISRO has registered around 60 such organizations. The Indian government aims to develop a private space industry, one that will complement the state-run space program, which has a reputation of affordable space launches. Already, India is the 6th largest player in the global space market. Almost 4% of the world's space tech companies are in India. The Indian space industry was valued at $7 billion in 2019. The goal is to hit the $50 billion mark by 2024. Today's launch is a step in that direction.
It's also
a major step forward to India developing its own space ecosystem and emerging as a frontline nation in the community of world nations. And of course, a turning point in India's startup movement.
But what benefit will an active private space sector bring for Indians? The rise of innovative space enterprises can boost the development of rockets and satellites. The new innovations can improve connectivity for Indians and potentially prove beneficial in areas like weather forecasts. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Our next story is about China. It is finally loosening up. A week ago, the government announced some 20 tweaks to its infamous zero-COVID policy. But the timing of this relaxation seems rather odd, as fresh COVID cases have peaked in the country since spring. The country reported more than 24,000 infections on Thursday. This is the highest number of cases since April. Have to say, after years of treating every single infection as a threat, China's newfound tolerance of COVID infection seems rather strange. Let me give you a few examples. Under the old playbook, the city of Shijiazhuang would have used mass testing to curb any kind of outbreak. But recently, its officials gave free rein to restaurants, malls, and public transport. Visitors would no longer require proof of a recent negative COVID test to enter these public spaces. But that's not all. As per the new guidelines, Chinese officials have been asked to give up their favorite activity. That is, they must not arbitrarily lock down cities. Something which has been a routine exercise in China of late. But the resolve of this decision would be put to test in Guangzhou, a metropolis that is reporting thousands of new cases each day. Harsh district-level controls are in place in the city, but analysts think that a city-wide lockdown is inevitable. Meanwhile, Hong Kong too is struggling with the virus, recording almost 5,000 cases every day. What happened to zero COVID? Hong Kong has still vowed to relax COVID restrictions, but it seems it can't make up its mind as to what's safe and what's unsafe. And so you have rules that are rather strange for residents, confusing them. Let me explain. Take trail running, for example. The government just removed a ban on race organizers providing food to the competitors, and yet the relaxation came with a strict provision. Runners were only allowed to eat bananas after the race. That too by themselves, alone, in silence, away from the checkpoints. Almost as though they're grounded for bad behavior. Now, this is just one example of rules that just don't make any sense and are exasperating for both the residents and businesses. Patrons need to show a negative rapid test to enjoy drinks in bars, but no such requirement exists for restaurants. As many as 240 people are permitted to attend a banquet. Yet outdoor gatherings are limited to 12. People need to scan a QR code to enter many premises, even though the government is no longer using the connected app for tracing residents' exposure to the infection. What gives? Another example of the contradictions at play is Hong Kong's entry process. It's convoluted. Travelers are banned from dining in at restaurants or going to bars for the first 3 days. But at the same time, a new arrival can go straight to work. They can travel to a crowded office directly from the airport if they want to. And the ban doesn't seem to be on the risk of infections, but just on leisure activities. It is the conflicting nature of Hong Kong's rules that has critics questioning the rationale behind them. The government says it is following a science-based approach to limit the spread of infections. However, no scientific evidence suggests that feeding bananas to runners can reduce COVID-19. Time now to take a look at what's making news around the world in Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russia continues its high-precision missile strikes targeting Ukrainian energy and military infrastructure, leaving at least 10 million people without power. Nancy Pelosi decides to step down as House Democratic leader. When Republicans take control of the chamber in January, Hakeem Jeffries is the frontrunner to lead the party in the U.S. House of Representatives. Swedish officials confirmed that the September blasts, which destroyed sections of the Nord Stream pipelines carrying gas from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea, were acts of sabotage. At least 21 people are killed in a massive fire at a residential building in the Gaza Strip, where the residents had attended a party where the deadly fire broke out. Amid the deadlocked climate talks, European Union makes a surprise offer, proposes a two-pronged approach that would create a pool of money for poorer countries and a push for tougher emission cuts. Russia says it hopes to arrange a prisoner exchange with the US for arms trafficker Victor Bout. This comes after American basketball star Brittany Griner began serving her sentence in a remote Russian prison. Japan's inflation rises to 3.6% year-on-year in October, the highest inflation in 4 decades, largely due to rising energy costs and a weak yen. Asia-Pacific is no one's backyard and should not become an arena of big power rivalry, says Chinese President Xi Jinping, warning against Cold War tensions in the region. FIFA makes a U-turn just 2 days before the World Cup begins in Qatar by banning alcohol sales in and around the 8 stadiums hosting the World Cup. The ban comes after reported pressure from the country's royal family and complicates FIFA's $75 million sponsorship agreement with Budweiser. Cristiano Ronaldo is set to face disciplinary action over his controversial interview with journalist Piers Morgan. Manchester United issued a fresh statement saying that they are taking appropriate steps after the 37-year-old launched an all-out attack on the club, manager, players and owners.
And with that, it's a wrap on tonight's show. Thanks for watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. I'll see you next week.
Il faut le dire, l'inaction gouvernementale est un crime de masse contre notre génération.